The moment my husband waved the butler over to take my grandmother's lasagna to the kitchen, I understood something about my marriage that I had been trying not to understand for 8 years. There were 60 people in that ballroom, Beacon Hill's oldest families. Charles Whitaker III, my father-in-law, was about to give the opening toast of his annual fall gathering. I had just walked through the front door of the house I had walked into 63 times over 8 years of marriage, holding a dish that took me 2 days and my whole heart to build. 6 layers. Ragu cooked for 8 hours, fresh mozzarella, my grandmother Angela's recipe, written in Italian on a card she had brought from Napoli in 1962. My husband, Bradley, looked at the dish in my hands. He went pale. He leaned in toward my ear and he whispered, in a voice so low only I could hear, "Gianna, I told you refined. This is diner food." His mother, Victoria, glided over like a ghost in a cream silk dress and said, loud enough for the nearest 12 guests to hear, "Oh dear. Well, we will put this aside for now. Our chef prepared a beautiful Atlantic salmon." Then Bradley turned to the butler, and in the voice he used for the housekeepers and the caterers, the voice he used for the people he believed were beneath him, he said, "Take this to the kitchen. Do not serve it." 60 people saw it happen. The dish left my hands. It disappeared through the swinging door of the Whitaker family kitchen like trash. I stood in the middle of that ballroom in a dress I had spent 3 weeks choosing, with nothing in my hands, and I felt every single part of me start to burn. What my husband did not know, what he had no way of knowing as he steered me by the elbow toward a round table in the corner, was that a woman in a navy suit standing near the bar had just watched every second of what had happened. A woman who had flown up from Manhattan that morning on a specific mission. A woman who had come to this party for one reason. Her name was Valentina Romano, and she had come to find me. But to understand how a woman like Valentina Romano ended up at a Whitaker family party on the first Saturday of October, I have to take you back to the day my husband's sister-in-law sent a text message to a woman she had been trying to introduce me to for 6 months. "My name is Gianna Ricci. I was born in the North End of Boston 38 years ago, on the second floor of a walk-up on Hanover Street, above a small Italian trattoria that my grandmother had opened in 1962. My grandmother was Angela Ricci. Everybody in the neighborhood called her Nonna Angela. She came to the United States from a village outside Napoli when she was 24 years old, with 1 suitcase, a sewing machine, and a leather notebook of her mother's recipes written in careful Italian script. For the first 2 years in Boston, she worked the sewing machine at a tailor shop on Salem Street. Then she saved enough money to rent a tiny storefront on Hanover Street. She named it Ricci's. 12 tables, 1 oven, 1 woman doing every job in the kitchen. She ran that trattoria for 43 years. My father, Paolo, took over the restaurant when my grandmother's knees finally gave out in 1996. My mother, Teresa, worked the front of the house. I grew up in that kitchen. I was 4 years old the first time my grandmother put me on a wooden step stool and let me stir a pot of ragu. I was 8 the first time she let me lay the pasta for a pan of lasagna. I was 12 when she handed me her leather notebook and told me, in the mixed Italian and English she used at the end of her life, "Gianna, you are the one. You keep these for me." I kept them. When I was 22, I took a year in Florence to study Italian regional cooking. I came home to Boston, and I worked as the sous chef in my father's kitchen for 6 years. By the time I was 28, I could run the entire restaurant alone on a Saturday night when we did 200 covers. I met Bradley when I was 28. He came to Ricci's with a group of co-workers from his investment fund for a client dinner. He saw me come out of the kitchen to greet his boss. He asked for my number before the espresso arrived. Bradley Whitaker was from Beacon Hill. His family had lived in the same 4-story house on Mount Vernon Street since 1894. His father, Charles Whitaker III, was the chairman of a private wealth management firm that had been passed down through the family for 4 generations. His mother, Victoria, ran the Museum of Fine Arts annual gala for 22 years before stepping down. His grandfather had been a United States Senator. His great-grandfather had been a Harvard dean. I had never dated anyone who lived in a house with a name. Bradley proposed to me after 14 months of dating on a bench in the Boston Public Garden on a Sunday afternoon in April. He told me he loved me. He told me I was the most alive person he had ever met. He told me I was the first person in his life who had not bored him in 10 years. I said yes. We got married at the Trinity Church in Copley Square when I was 30 years old. The reception was at the Somerset Club. My father, in a rented tuxedo, danced with me on a marble dance floor under a chandelier that Victoria Whittaker had told me was a replica of one in the Palace of Versailles. My grandmother Angela, who was 88 at the time, sat in a chair at the edge of the dance floor and watched me the whole night without saying a single word. A week before the wedding, Bradley had asked me, very gently, if I would consider stopping work at my father's restaurant. It is just Gianna. You know, the Whittaker name. It comes with certain expectations. My mother wants us to be present at events. There are things I need my wife to do. You cannot be at a restaurant kitchen at 10 in the evening. I stopped working at Ricci's 2 weeks after the wedding. For 8 years, I did what Bradley asked. I went to Victoria's luncheons. I sat on the board of a small Beacon Hill Preservation Society. I learned to say Mount Vernon Street and Beacon Street and Commonwealth Avenue in the specific tone that the Whittaker women used when they were placing themselves on the map of the city. And in those 8 years, Bradley introduced me to his family exactly 127 times. I know the number because I counted. 127 introductions. Not once did he say, "This is Gianna. Her grandmother came from Napoli. Her family owns Ricci's, the oldest family-run Italian restaurant in the North End. She trained in Florence. She was the sous chef at a restaurant that has been reviewed by the Boston Globe 8 times. Not once, he said, "This is my wife." That was it. I stopped telling people where I came from. I stopped mentioning my father. I stopped correcting Victoria when she referred to my neighborhood as that part of the city. I stopped cooking lasagna for Bradley at home because, after the 3rd time, he told me the smell of garlic was going to settle into the drapes. I started cooking for my own family again, in secret. On the Tuesdays when Bradley traveled, I drove back to Hanover Street. I cooked with my mother. I ate with my father. I made batches of my grandmother's ragu and stored them in mason jars at the back of the restaurant's walk-in freezer. My grandmother Angela died in the fall of my 7th year of marriage. She was 95 years old. She left me the leather notebook, the sewing machine, and a sterling silver crucifix that her own mother had brought from the old country. I kept the notebook in the drawer next to my bed. I opened it every night. 8 months after my grandmother died, Bradley's sister-in-law, Lauren, sent a text message to a woman named Valentina Romano. Lauren Whittaker was married to Bradley's older brother, James. She was 36 years old. She had grown up in Greenwich, Connecticut. She had gone to Brown. She had worked for a public relations firm in New York for 12 years before marrying James and moving to Boston. Lauren was the only person in the Whittaker family who had ever asked me a question about myself. In my 2nd year of marriage, she had driven to the North End with me on a Tuesday afternoon, ignored my warnings that the parking was impossible, and sat in the front window of Ricci's eating a plate of my father's osso buco, while my mother told her stories about the neighborhood in the 1970s. In my 3rd year of marriage, I made a small lasagna for Lauren's 35th birthday. She ate half the pan by herself and cried over the last bite. "Gianna, this is the best thing I have ever eaten in my life. Why are you not doing this professionally?" I told her the same thing I told myself. I told her Bradley needed me to be present. I told her the Whittaker wives did not have public careers. I told her I would get back to it someday. Lauren did not push me, but she kept asking me to cook. Over the next 5 years, she had me quietly cater 15 of her private dinner parties at her house in the Back Bay. She paid me in cash that I never deposited in the joint account I shared with Bradley. She told me the cash was for my mother because she knew my father's restaurant had been struggling since the pandemic. I cooked for Lauren because cooking for Lauren was the only way I had of still being Gianna Ricci. In March of this past year, 6 months after my grandmother Angela died, Lauren had a dinner party at her Back Bay house. There were 12 guests. I made a classic Neapolitan lasagna using my grandmother's recipe. 6 layers, 8-hour ragu, fresh mozzarella from a shop in the North End, a bechamel so delicate it melted on the tongue. At the end of the dinner, Lauren's friend Catherine Devlin, who ran a private equity firm in New York, pushed her plate away with tears in her eyes and said, "Lauren, who is this woman? She should be on television." Lauren smiled at me. She did not say anything that night, but a few weeks later, Lauren texted me a screenshot. It was a message thread between Lauren and a woman named Valentina Romano. Lauren had sent Valentina a photograph of my lasagna, a paragraph about my grandmother, and a description of my family's restaurant. Valentina had replied in 3 lines. "Lauren, I need to meet her. When can we do this? Next time I am in Boston, I want to eat her food." The name Valentina Romano did not mean anything to me at the time. Lauren had to explain who she was. Valentina was the senior food editor at Bon Appétit magazine. She had joined the magazine 20 years earlier as a cookbook reviewer. She had written 7 James Beard award-winning food essays. She had been profiled in the New York Times. She had personally discovered and championed 4 of the 10 most celebrated Italian-American chefs working in the country. Lauren had been trying for 6 months to get me and Valentina in the same room. I had refused every single time. I had told Lauren I could not do it behind Bradley's back. The fall gathering was different. The fall gathering was the one event on the Whitaker calendar that I could not skip. Victoria had been organizing it since 1989. Lauren texted me in September, 4 weeks before the fall gathering. "Gianna, Valentina is going to be in Boston that weekend. I am bringing her to the gathering as my +1. Please do not be upset. I need you to finally meet her, and I need Bradley to see you be the person you actually are." I read the text 7 times. I decided that night to bring my grandmother's lasagna. I spent 2 days making it. On the Thursday before the fall gathering, I drove to Hanover Street and worked in my father's restaurant kitchen for 7 hours. I made the ragu, 8 hours on low heat. San Marzano tomatoes, a whole pig shoulder, a veal shank, pancetta, 3 kinds of onion, a carrot, a stalk of celery, red wine, a bay leaf, salt. On the Friday, I made the fresh pasta in my mother's kitchen upstairs. She rolled it out with me. We did not talk about Bradley. We did not talk about the Whitakers. We did not talk about what tomorrow was going to be. We talked about my grandmother Angela. My mother cried twice. On the Saturday morning, I assembled the lasagna. 6 layers. I pulled the mozzarella fresh from a shop on Salem Street at 7 in the morning on the walk back from early Mass at St. Leonard's Church. I sprinkled fresh basil. I added a light dusting of Parmigiano. At 3 in the afternoon, I drove up Beacon Hill with the lasagna in an insulated carrier on the passenger seat of my car. Bradley was already at his parents' house. He had left early that morning to help his father set up the bar. I parked on Mount Vernon Street. I carried the lasagna up the marble steps of the Whitaker residence. The front door was open. The butler, a quiet man named David who had worked for the Whitakers for 20 years, greeted me with the small, polite nod he always gave me. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Whitaker." "Hello, David. Where should I set this?" "Oh, Mrs. Whitaker, I am not sure. Let me find Mr. Whitaker for you." Bradley came out of the dining room within 30 seconds. He looked at the carrier in my hands. He went pale. "Gianna, what is that?" "It is a lasagna." "A lasagna." "I made Nonna Angela's lasagna. I wanted to bring something I made myself." He set his jaw. He lowered his voice. He stepped closer to me, almost into my shoulder, and he said, "Gianna, I told you refined, ratatouille, a salad. I gave you specific options. This is diner food. This is not what this party is." "Bradley, it is my grandmother's lasagna. I made it myself. I want to share it." He exhaled. He closed his eyes. He opened them. Then his mother, Victoria, came into the foyer. She was wearing a cream silk dress and the pearl earrings her mother had worn to the coronation of Queen Elizabeth in 1953. She walked up to us, her eyes already on the carrier. "Oh dear, what do we have here?" "Gianna made a lasagna, Mom." "Oh." Victoria paused. She smiled in the way she smiled when she was about to say something cruel, in a voice kind enough that everyone else in the room would think she was being generous. "Well, how thoughtful. We will put this aside for now. Our chef prepared a lovely Atlantic salmon that has been marinating since last night. We will have to save your lasagna for another time." She turned to David. "David, would you take this to the kitchen, please? Just put it aside." David looked at me. He looked at Bradley. He looked at Victoria. I held the carrier tighter. Bradley put his hand over mine. He pried the handle of the carrier out of my fingers. He handed it to David. "Take this to the kitchen," he said. "Do not serve it." David took the carrier. He walked through the swinging door at the back of the foyer. I watched my grandmother's lasagna disappear. 60 people saw it happen. The salmon was served at 6 in the evening. I sat at a round table in the corner of the ballroom next to a retired federal judge and his wife. I did not eat the salmon. I did not drink the wine. I did not speak. Lauren caught my eye from across the room around 6:30. She was sitting next to a woman in a navy suit I did not recognize. Lauren was crying, quietly, with her hands in her lap. The woman in the navy suit stood up from her seat around 6:45. She excused herself from the table. She disappeared into the kitchen hallway. She did not come back for 22 minutes. When Valentina Romano came back into the ballroom, she was carrying a small white plate with 1 forkful of my grandmother's lasagna on it. She walked to the head of the dining room. Charles Whittaker III was about to rise for his opening toast. The string ensemble hired for the evening was already packing up their instruments because the meal was almost over. Valentina stopped at the head of the room. She set her plate on the edge of the head table. She turned to face the 60 guests. She was not tall. She was maybe 5'4". Silver streaks in black hair pulled back. A navy Armani suit. Pearl studs. She was 58 years old. And when she began to speak, she spoke in the voice of a woman who had spent her entire adult life telling other people what they were going to eat. "I apologize for the interruption," she said. "My name is Valentina Romano. I am the senior food editor at Bon Appétit magazine in New York. I was brought here tonight by Mrs. Lauren Whittaker. Lauren has been telling me for the last 6 months that I had to find a way to try the cooking of her sister-in-law, Gianna Ricci." The room went very still. Charles Whittaker III set down his glass. "I arrived in Boston this morning with a very specific intention. I came to find Gianna Ricci, and I came to eat one dish that her grandmother's granddaughter had made." Bradley, across the room, stood up. Valentina did not look at him. "Half an hour ago, I watched the son of this house, Mr. Bradley Whittaker, ask your butler to carry a lasagna, made by his wife, to the kitchen, not to be served. I watched him do it in front of every single person in this room. I watched his mother, the host of this event, refer to the lasagna as something to be, quote, put aside." Victoria stood up. "I am afraid this is not appropriate." "Mrs. Whittaker, with all respect, I have been doing my job for 22 years. I know what is appropriate at a dinner party. I also know what has been hidden in your kitchen for the last 22 minutes. She picked up the small white plate with the single forkful. "I went to the kitchen. I asked your butler to show me the dish. He did. I ate 1 forkful. That forkful is the reason I am standing here." She turned to face me. "Mrs. Ricci, in the 22 years I have been senior editor at Bon Appétit, I have eaten hundreds of lasagnas in hundreds of kitchens in 6 countries. I have judged Italian cooking competitions on 3 continents, and I can tell you without hesitation that what your grandmother taught you to make is the single best Italian-American lasagna I have ever eaten in my career." The ballroom was silent. "I would like to put you on the cover of our December issue. I would like to commission a monthly column from you to begin in February about Italian-American family cooking. And I would like to introduce you on Monday morning to my publishing agent, who is going to offer you a 2-book deal." She paused. "I would also like, before I leave this house tonight, to have your lasagna brought out from the kitchen and served to every single person in this room, because they are not going to believe what they missed." Valentina Romano turned around. She walked out of the ballroom. I looked at my husband. Bradley was sitting down again. His face was white. His mother, Victoria, was sitting very still next to him. Charles Whittaker III was looking at his son with the specific expression of a man who has suddenly realized what kind of son he has raised. Lauren came running over to me. She was crying. "Gianna, I am so sorry. I should have told you. I am so sorry." I took her hand. I stood up. I walked out of the Whittaker ballroom without saying a single word to my husband. I flew to New York on Monday morning. Valentina met me at the Bon Appétit office on West 57th Street. I signed a contract for a monthly column that afternoon. Her agent, a woman named Ruth Chen, met me for dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village. By the end of that dinner, I had a 2-book deal with a division of Penguin Random House. I moved out of the Beacon Hill house within a week. I filed for divorce on a Thursday. The December issue of Bon Appétit came out 10 weeks later. I was on the cover. The headline read, "The Ricci Family Table, How Gianna Ricci is Bringing Italian-American Cooking Back." The feature was 6 pages long. It included 3 recipes from my grandmother's notebook. It mentioned my father's restaurant by name. It told the story of Nonna Angela, the village outside Napoli, the leather notebook, and the sewing machine she had brought with her in 1962. The feature was picked up by the Today Show, by the New York Times food section, by NPR, by every major food blog in the country. By January, my father's restaurant had a 2-hour wait on Saturday nights. By March, I was filming the pilot of a public television series called Italian Tables with Gianna Ricci. The series aired last autumn on PBS, 8 episodes. Each episode centered on one dish from my grandmother's notebook, cooked with one member of the Ricci family. My first book, Nonna's Table, came out in September of last year. Penguin Random House gave me a $500,000 advance. The book was on the New York Times bestseller list for 14 weeks. My second book, Sunday in Napoli, comes out this summer. Last fall, I opened my own restaurant in the North End, 3 doors down from my father's old Ricci's. I named my restaurant Nonna Angela's. My father is the general manager. My mother runs the front of the house. My cousin Paolo runs the bar. Every recipe on the menu came out of my grandmother's leather notebook. Nonna Angela's received its first Michelin star 6 months after opening. We are the first Italian-American restaurant in Boston to hold a Michelin star. My divorce from Bradley Whittaker was final last summer. Bradley did not fight the divorce. His lawyer tried once to make a claim on the Bon Appétit contract and the book advance. My attorney, Lauren Whittaker, who had quietly gone back to school after her 35th birthday and had passed the Massachusetts bar at 37, walked into the deposition room and dismantled his case in 90 minutes. Yes, Lauren left James a month after my grandmother's lasagna disappeared into the Whittaker kitchen. She told him she had spent 12 years in a family that was incapable of seeing the people who served them. She told him she was done. Lauren and I are business partners now. She handles the legal side of my publishing deals, the PBS contract, and the restaurant. She comes to Nonna Angela's every Sunday evening. She sits at the bar with a glass of red wine, and she watches the kitchen. Victoria Whittaker tried to call me twice in the first month after the fall gathering. I did not pick up. She sent me a letter on her engraved stationery 8 weeks later. I never read it. My mother put it in a drawer. Charles Whittaker III came to Nonna Angela's on a Tuesday evening in February of this year. He did not have a reservation. He came in alone. He sat at the bar. He ordered a glass of Brunello di Montalcino and a plate of my lasagna. I came out of the kitchen when the server told me who was at the bar. He saw me. He stood up. He nodded, very formally. He said, "Gianna, I wanted you to know. I have thought a great deal about what happened that night at our house. My family behaved badly. My son behaved worst of all. I wanted you to know that I see it now. And I wanted to taste the food that I never allowed myself to taste on the evening you brought it into our home." I looked at him for a long moment. I said, "Thank you for coming, Mr. Whitaker. I hope you enjoy your meal." I went back to the kitchen. Charles ate alone at the bar for 2 hours. He left a tip that was almost the price of the meal. He has not come back. Bradley has not come to the restaurant. I heard through Lauren that he has moved to a smaller apartment in the South End. He is no longer a principal at his firm. He has not remarried. I do not think about him very often anymore. Today, I am writing this from the window of my apartment above Nonna Angela's on a bright Saturday morning in April. My mother, Teresa, is downstairs in the restaurant prepping for the lunch service. My father is on the phone with a supplier about pistachios. The leather notebook my grandmother brought from Napoli in 1962 is sitting open on my kitchen table next to a fresh espresso. Page 12, the original Neapolitan lasagna recipe, is the page I have opened to. There is a line, written at the bottom of the recipe in my grandmother's Italian handwriting, that I did not notice until the week after the fall gathering. The line says, in Italian, "Non chiedere permesso," which means, "Do not ask permission." I wrote that line into the dedication of Nonna's table, for Nonna Angela, who never asked. The night my husband sent my grandmother's lasagna to the kitchen like garbage, I learned something about marriage. It is not the person you are that matters. It is the person you are allowed to be. I spent 8 years being the person Bradley Whitaker allowed me to be. I have spent the last 18 months being someone else. Italian women do not forget. We carry our grandmothers with us, in our hands, in our kitchens, in the way we salt the water before the pasta. And we do not ask for permission to be who we are. Not anymore.